Before we begin, a brief word of warning. We're going to be looking at two episodes today, Taliko and Unruhe. Taliko was written by a white writer, yet focuses on a largely African-American cast. Its focus is a lot about immigration of people coming from Africa to the United States, and it's not handled in the most sensitive of ways. Unruhe contains scenes of violence against women, particularly the lobotomy of two women over the course of the episode. We're also going to be talking a bit about lobotomies and what the procedure entails in the episode. It's the kind of thing that might make some people uncomfortable, so do be aware of that if you're going to continue listening.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I've got some weirdo news.
Oh, aye.
Well, so you might remember a few weeks ago there was a thing about this congressional hearing on UFOs and what they'd recovered from space. Allegedly.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the hearing actually went ahead. And in Congress, and they heard from several key witnesses, including David Grush, who is the apparent whistleblower former intelligence official who made the claim in June that they had intact and partially intact alien vehicles. There's a few things that come out of this. Basically, there's sort of no concrete evidence as yet, but the Republicans are dead set on believing the aliens are real, whereas the Democrats are kind of going, "You're just saying things."
Okay.
And apparently, it's very X-Files kind of conspiracy, like long-running, world-spanning conspiracy cover-ups. That basically this guy's life has been threatened by the Men in Black. The Pentagon has denied a load of this, as you might imagine. And yeah, they're saying they don't have any reverse engineered stuff, they don't have any alien bodies. When the original claims came out in June, Grush claims the government had, here's a quote, a very large, like a football field kind of size alien craft. They've got hold of this. That's enormous. And also, the US is in possession of a bell-like craft which Benito Mussolini's government had recovered in northern Italy in 1933. There's also, bizarrely, a sighting of dark grey or black cubes inside of clear spheres, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of the sphere.
Okay.
And apparently military see these things every day, and they officially class them as UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, rather than UFOs. The old thing. One thing that keeps coming up in these quotes. So a Republican congressman from Tennessee who is leading the UFO investigation has claimed in recent weeks the US had evidence of technology that defies all our laws of physics, and that alien craft possessed technology that could turn us into a charcoal briquette.
Fair enough.
More on that as it develops, but yeah, sort of, it's like seeing the X-Files in real life in Congress, which is really weird.
True that.
Do you have any other news?
No, not really. We're way under 40 days until FileFest now, so that's getting very exciting for everyone who's able to attend that.
No. So we'll move along to episodes, the first of which, as per the content warning at the start, is Taliko. Or Taliko? Taliko, isn't it?
I think it's Taliko. I'm
Taliko.
not. That might not be what I said in the content warning at the start now. I'm not 100% sure.
It's fine. Okay, so Taliko, directed by James Charlson, written by Howard Gordon, and first broadcast on the 18th of October 1996. Guest stars, You're Gonna Kill Me.
Okay.
Carl Lumbly, who was Marcus Duff, who was the immigrant social worker.
Okay.
He's in the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Why am I not surprised?
He's also been coming to America. He was in Doctor Sleep, and he is the replacement casting for Dick Halloran.
Okay.
He's also in Sequest 2032, the sci-fi series I don't think anyone remembers anymore, which was in a submarine. And they got abducted by aliens at the end of season 2.
Fair enough.
He was also played the Martian Manhunter a bunch of times in various cartoon projects and video games. He's in Bioshock 2, Minerva's Den. He's in Diablo 3 as the male witch doctor. And he was in Tacoma.
Oh, just the voice of the playable character in Diablo 3 then.
And he's one of the cast members in Tacoma. I think he's Odin, one of the AIs.
Oh, I see.
There's also Zoe Smoke, who played Diabria, who was in Waterworld and Vampire in Brooklyn. And Willie Amakei, who played Samuel Aboa, was in Congo.
It should be noted that the actor playing Aboa is also an Olympic Ghanaian sprinter.
Which is why his IMDb is actually kind of sparse, it turns out.
Yeah, apparently he just returned home to California after the, I think, was it the 1996 Olympics in Georgia?
It would have been 1996, wouldn't it?
So that's why they got him in the part for this episode.
Okay, so Teloko. On an international flight, an African man enters the bathroom where he's attacked by a man exhibiting albino traits. The attacker leaves the bathroom with a normal black skin tone. Before the plane lands in the United States, a flight attendant discovers the victim in the bathroom devoid of his skin pigmentation. 3 months later, Skinner calls Scully in and informs that 4 African American men have been kidnapped in Philadelphia. One of them has been found dead, exhibiting depigmentation. A specialist from the CDC believes the men have died from a disease, and has requested Scully to investigate the case. Mulder barges into the case and has some of the evidence samples from the body's autopsy analysed by Agent Pendrell. Amongst the samples, they find a seed from a rare West African passion flower. Mulder takes the seed to his UN informant, Marita, and asks for help. She provides him with information on the incident on the plane. Meanwhile, Samuel Aboa, the man from the plane, the attacker, is an African immigrant who is seeking citizenship. He attacks a young black man while he's waiting for the bus, kidnapping him and taking him into his apartment. Investigating the disappearance, Mulder predicts another seed will be found. They visit Marcus Duff, a social worker who is helping Aboa apply for citizenship, and cross-reference the names from the flight with those applying for permanent residency or a work visa. This leads them to Aboa, who runs when they try to question him, and he is discovered shortly after squeezed into a drainage pipe. Aboa appears to have no symptoms of disease when he is analysed at a local medical centre, but Scully plans to examine him more. Mulder sees a diplomat from the Burkina Faso, who tells him of an old folktale of the Bambara people about the Teleko, which were nocturnal spirits of the air. The diplomat claims to have encountered a Teleko in his youth but was saved from his father, and instead one of his friends was killed by the creature. Scully examines a PET scan of Aboa which shows that he has no pituitary gland. Aboa swiftly escapes and meets Duff in a car. He paralyzes Duff in the same manner as his other victims, and inserts a long metal object up his nose. A policeman interrupts the process and requests an ambulance. The police tell Mulder and Scully they are sweeping the area for Aboa. Driving around, Mulder tells Scully he thinks Aboa is the mythical Teleko, and stops at a demolition site, remembering that Pendrell has found asbestos fibres on the body recovered. Mulder and Scully split up. Mulder is swiftly paralysed and taken into a duct by Aboa. Scully heard Mulder's shots help before the paralysis set in and tracks him down, and is able to get him out, finding the depigmented bodies of the other victims. Aboa attacks Scully, but Mulder is able to show her via his expressions that Aboa is behind her, and she turns around to shoot him. In her sum-up, Scully writes that Aboa is struggling to survive while awaiting trial. She muses that Aboa's condition and survival may be discovered by science. Humans have a fear of an alien among them, which causes them to deceive, inveigle, and obfuscate. Hey, this episode should not have been written by Howard Gordon, should it?
Absolutely not in any way.
Oh my god.
I know this is an episode you have a particular dislike for.
It's, well, actually, I had found a whole new reason to dislike it watching it again through again, because we've joked about the various X-Files vampires. You've got the fat vampire, you've got the liver vampire, you've got the one instance of the vampires, who were rubbish, and now we've got the skin pigment vampire.
Melanin vampire.
The melanin vampire. And that, aside from you're probably straying into areas that you're not qualified to get into, or you should probably have someone else look at the script and say, what on earth are you doing? Because it feels really iffy to be doing this. We've got the thing that you pointed out is that Teleko is basically Squeeze, but with half of the episode missing.
Yeah. There's no hiding it. It is Squeeze again. Down to the fact that he can squeeze himself into like cabinet drawers and drainage pipes and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the problem is that Toombs used his ability to manipulate and squeeze into places to attack victims. Aboa just does it when he runs from Mulder or to escape the hospital, and then the rest of the time he just does it out in the open.
I think it's inferred that he does this to hide during the day, that he is your typical vampire who only kills people at night.
Yeah, but he's got a whole apartment, so he doesn't need to cram himself into these little places. Plus, he's actually working as a day worker, we see at one point. So, yeah, I don't understand what's going on here.
I did try and do a bit of research into what a teleco actually is to see if it matches the episode. And as far as I can tell, in Bambara mythology, it is not a teleco, it is the teleco.
Oh, okay, so there's only one of them.
It's one of the children of the creation god, and it's a wind god, like it says in the episode, but it's the creature that's responsible for creating man in their creation legend. So it's absolutely nothing like what we have here.
No. And it also feels like we're doing exotic stuff just for the sake of it. Like, I don't for the life of me understand why he's got his possibly blow dart tube down his throat, which...
As far as my research went, Chris Carter just thought that would look cool.
Yeah, and it's not actually clear that is the blow dart pipe, because that's where the spiky thing he uses to jab up someone's nose into the pituitary gland, we assume, is stored.
I wasn't sure, based on what we're going to talk about later in Unruhe, if that's a kind of straw or just something he's using to kind of drag out what he needs, because it's got a barbed tip to it. It's really unclear.
Yeah, it's it's a whole lot of, and then sort of the fact he's storing it down his throat as well, though, it just does the whole big yawning mouth thing, and you're kind of going, what? I mean, it feels kind of odd in contrast then to Tushai and Tombs, and even our vampires, for them to need a tool to do this. If this is how he survived for millions of years, it's really odd that he needs a tool to do it.
I think he'd have a long tongue or something like that.
Yeah, because he has no pituitary gland, so he literally can't exist without getting melanin.
Well, it's going back to our movie of the week that we discussed a few weeks ago of The Relic, where the creature in that eats hypothalamus, I think. Yeah. So it has a kind of proboscis-like tongue that it can use to stamp them out of someone's head.
Yeah. And so you'd expect for biology to make sense. I mean, maybe we are trying to pass this off as a more spiritual thing, but even so, it's really odd he decided to come to America.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever get into why the Teleco decided to do this.
No, it's not mentioned in any way. In fact, it's an uncomfortable area, as the thing that made me feel the most icky about this episode is the fact that its theme is basically otherness.
Yes.
So you've got the idea of, Mulder touches on it really briefly, as does Mr. Duff in the episode, where they talk about the experiences that these people have had in West Africa versus why they're fleeing to the UK. And Mulder mentioning the fact that they're like lesser citizens and nobody kind of takes them seriously. So you've got that idea of the other, but then you also have this idea of there is an alien being amongst them that is essentially stealing something intrinsic to their person, which the uncomfortable level is it's basically stealing their blackness.
Yeah, to cover up his own lack of black.
Mm.
And we'll sort of skim over the fact that the makeup job is occasionally okay on this, and often it looks terrible.
I think it often looks okay on Aboa himself.
It's everyone else.
It's when you see him with the kind of like Vitiligo patterns when his melanin's just starting to go, the special effect looks okay. On everybody else, particularly his victims, it looks absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, and also the implication there at the end as well is that he doesn't actually need to go for black people since he's going for Mulder there when they've interrupted him.
It could just be that he's trying to do away with Mulder because Mulder's being a pain in the neck.
True, but he will have melanin. Probably not as much as other people, but he'll have.
I imagine, though, if you're a creature that needs to consume melanin to survive, as stupid as that sounds, you're going to be wanting to go for people with higher skin pigmentation.
Yeah, though I think you need to bring up the nitpickers issue with this, which is a good one.
Oh, his attack patterns is what you're getting at. Yeah, I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like over a 6-month span, Aboa has killed 4 people. And over the course of the episode, he kills 2 people in as many days.
Yeah, and while other monsters could get up with an accelerating pattern of necessity, it's not, there's no sense that that's happening here.
You assume on that basis of he needs to feed once every month and a half or so, technically.
Yeah. And it's But curious, it's really odd as well, though. It's set up as framed as a Skull. Well, at least the story given to Scully is this is a disease that's going around, and I don't quite know why we're doing that, other than it's someone presumably saying we need a different way to bring Mulder and Scully into the case. Let's have Scully's expertise as a medical doctor be forefront for a change, but
Scully's not a virologist.
no. Again, this is the TV problem of if you're a scientist, you're good at all the science.
True.
Which I'm sure the X-Files will never abuse in the future for anything. Except computers. She can't do computers, but she can do all the biology stuff.
I guess we've done things like asking Scully's opinion on insects before and stuff like that.
True. I mean, we do keep forgetting her PhD is in Einstein's twin paradox.
Which is physics.
Yeah. So, yeah, she should actually be more involved with a lot of the NASA stuff back in Space Ghost.
I think they've done away with a lot of that in the TV series, though, because if we remember right, the novelization specifically says something like her undergrad degree's in astronomy.
Yeah. But in the pilot episode, Mulder does say Einstein's twin paradox.
Yeah.
That is the recorded line.
That's still
in the episode.
there, yeah.
I mean, it could be the kind of thing where we've decided to forget various things about the pilot, and we're just going to have to move on. But yeah, Scully is good at autopsies and some medical stuff, so she can do all those. Well, it's like her biopsy in Herrenvolk, where she's doing her the analysis of the smallpox vaccination. I think you'd get someone else to do this, Scully. I don't think you do this yourself. I mean, you are apparently a wonder scientist, but really.
Well, I'm going on the basis in this episode Scully doesn't know what she's doing because the CDC have got her involved in this. We don't know what this illness is, but it appears to be something kind of like very, very fast, virulent, and fatal.
Yeah.
And Scully's doing that autopsy with absolutely no hazmat gear on whatsoever.
There is a way of viewing it which is not great for everyone involved, but the whole it's only affecting black people, and so Scully's going to flaunt in there and go, yep.
As
fine.
you said, everyone's got melanin.
Yeah, I know. But it's kind of sweeping attitude they seem to have when they assign the case, don't they? There's no, this will be an outbreak amongst the wider population. It's very much a case of this is an outbreak amongst a very specific part of the population, and we need to do something about it. Changing tactic quickly, though. Is it me, or is Marita very different to X and Deep Throat so far? As in, the first time Mulder's contacted her, and it's been like literally 2 episodes since he met her, and she's going, "What the hell are you doing? Get away from me!"
He has kind of come and bothered her at work.
I know, but
This isn't pasting the X in the window.
does he have to paste an M instead? Can we have that? Or you have to draw an M on his
The Marita signal.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, he at least has read into the situation, and she's not disabused him of it fully, but he says, you made the overtures or something, and my response to that would be, that must have been off screen, because she just showed you a file, dude.
It doesn't seem the right time to approach her about this as well.
No,
because...
late at night, outside the UN.
And also, her knowledge has been entwined with the conspiracy, not with this random viral outbreak that doesn't seem to be linked to aliens in any way.
True, although it's not as if Deep Throat and X exactly stayed siloed, was it? Because X got involved in Sleep, which does tie back into the conspiracy
Sleepless.
Weirdly. Sleepless, yeah. And Deep Throat was involved with the Eve Project. So
and Ghost in the Machine.
And Ghost in the Machine. So, yeah, they're not, while it feels like they should be clear-cut, they're not. They're kind of the writer's crutch for, we need someone to deliver information to Mulder. We've got this established conspiracy person.
It only really makes sense for Marita to be approached because she's tied to the UN, and this is technically an international matter if it's caused by somebody coming from Burkina Faso.
Yeah. It just feels really fast because both X and Deep Throat were kind of introduced and then they laid low for a bit before they actually came to prominence again. Whereas this is, yep, Mulder's given up immediately on trying to figure out what's going on. I'm going to talk to Marita and get her to set me up with this diplomat who's going to... I'm going to tell him I'm going to believe whatever he says.
Mulder's involvement in this seems to be really, really more tenuous than usual as well.
They were struggling to get him into this episode.
As Mulder decides that it's not a disease based on absolutely nothing whatsoever, he then finds this passion vine seed on the victim, and he decides based on that there's something insidious about the seed, and that's entirely Mulder's thread off.
You could see it, and we'll have to keep an eye out for it, as the starting point of a shift in the FBI. Though what will precipitate this is not clear, because nothing out of Heron Vulcan Home would really tie into this. But a attempt to push Scully in a more useful direction within the FBI and split her off from Mulder. I mean, there's no actual indication they're not, because no one then shouts at Mulder and says, "What are you doing here? Get out." But as you say, yeah, they're struggling to actually involve Mulder, even though he's correct about everything. As usual.
He's just always correct about everything because he's Mulder, and that's how the series works.
I know, but it is like there's a lot of hunches there, and he's just correct. That's fine, apparently, and he's going to save the day, sort of.
But whenever I find a grass seed on my cats, I don't suspect that vampires are involved.
Well, I should now. Vampires stalking them out in the wilderness for some reason.
You do. As much as this episode makes me uncomfortable, I don't think it ever should have been written by a white man, and I think they focused on the wrong things. The casting of a Boa is actually fairly good for the casting of someone as a monster. It feeds into the same as the guy who plays Squeeze, where you've got this kind of unblinking, slightly inhuman victim who's not responding in quite the right way. You're almost in a predatory fashion.
Yeah, I'd give you that. Whenever they have scenes of him with someone else, there's always a level of threat. Like when the social worker comes into his apartment the first time, you're convinced that he's just going to fall upon him and then sort of incapacitate him immediately. Yeah,
it's hard to put a finger on it. It is just something predatory about him, and the fact that he's always a bit slow to respond to all the questions asked of him and things like that give you this impression of a kind of waiting hungry monster ready to strike.
Yeah, very much so. One thing I did think that was, I don't know, it was a bit unclear, was I think the first time I watched this episode, I assumed that Boa was a stowaway on the plane, and in retrospect, that's nonsense. He's just clearly another passenger who's been lying in wait for someone to come to the bathroom to then suck out the melanin.
You're right. It is framed a bit more like he is just hidden in the bathroom.
Yeah, and that he's assumed someone else's identity, but he can't really, because that sort of throws a whole lot of other stuff out. At the same time, though, you'd think you've got a plane ticket, you've got on this plane, you're going to emigrate to the United States. You'd have some idea of the time span, so you know if you're going to run out of melanin mid-flight and then risk exposing yourself like this.
Yeah, you're right. Especially as it's not an instant thing. We see from the bits when a Boa's on the hunt that he just gradually loses melanin over time. So you'd have someone who's sat potentially in his chair with the colour leaching out of his skin as he's there. It would be a bit of a dead giveaway that there's something off about him.
Exactly. And somehow he's sort of snuck back to the back of the plane and no one else has noticed that passengers have been missing for most of the flight.
Probably a bit of an uncomfortable thing knowing what we know about albino people in the black community as well, particularly in Africa, is that they're often subject to horrible violence too. Because, there's this whole scene, it's even Taliko in mythology, who is often portrayed as being albino, this idea that there's something inherently magical about them, so therefore they're often met with violence and superstition and things in the community, so making an albino villain here is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and also ties back to the long-standing problem that people with albinism have of how often albinos are villains in things.
Mm. You've got that idea of being pale with red eyes that makes you something frightening.
Yes. And the fact that you very rarely see them in another instance. I was trying to think of any positive ones. I think even Evil Within, where Leslie is kind of incidental, is still framed as potentially threatening for the future.
Yeah, it is rare to see an albino character as being a good guy.
Yeah, very rare. I mean, the only ones I think of, Evangelion, and they are very complicated.
You're using the term good guy loosely there.
Well, no, I wasn't going to say good guy, I was thinking of the albino representations, because the other one that sprung to mind was Da Vinci Code, and he is certainly not.
Oh my, yes.
Yeah. And the Hogfather.
Yes, true.
None of them are heroic at all, they're all villains.
No, I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode as well, of some that are anti-hero, and that's the best I can do.
Yeah. It did come up before, didn't it?
I can't remember which episode it was either. We definitely have mentioned this before, So, which shows again that it's an X-Files problem if we've had to bring up albino villains more than once.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, as much as he's not got the worst track record, it still doesn't surprise me that Howard Gordon wrote this one. Really, Howard, could you just not?
It's one of those episodes that could have been sensitive if it had been written by a black writer and also focused more on this theme of them being immigrants.
Yeah, and again, it's this reboot, rehash, whatever series that Jordan Pele is involved with is, if they're not starting completely from scratch but are going to pick and choose from existing episodes, it's like Teleco should be top of the list of, we need to fix this one.
Mm. There were elements of Teleco that actually made me think of Get Out. It was particularly the bit with the paralysed man at the bus stop. It was a lot like the sink into the floor paralysis in Get Out.
Well, and also when he's got in the apartment and he's in the same position still.
Yep, tied to the chair.
Yeah.
Well, not tied, just paralysed in the chair.
So we don't know if Jordan Pele has watched the X-Files, but given he's involved with the reboot, I think it's fairly safe to say he's certainly aware of the series.
Mm.
And it wouldn't surprise me, though, if he actually has some past experience as someone who's watched the series. So, yeah, it's very much what I think. It's very much put a pin in that for future. It'll be very interesting to see if Teleco or something like that ever comes around again and how it's treated differently.
In the revival, if it does happen, I'd be interested to see a more sensitive take on your Teleco, your Fresh Bones, basically any time that we've used a minority community as the villain. Hell Money, I guess,
Hell
would be our
Money.
other one. Yeah. Anyone with Native Americans in it.
Yeah. Hell Money, particularly, can we get James Hong back in to reprise the role or something and do something better?
It's just sad that, as nostalgic as the X-Files is, these aren't things I thought of when I was like 13 and watching this. But rewatching it now, it's so uncomfortable, some of these episodes.
Yeah. And we know some of these characters are going to crop up again and some of them just don't, and this is their one shot.
Luckily, I'm fairly sure this is a one-shot. We're not going to revisit Teleco at any point.
Yeah, I don't think any of the cast in this one are sort of slated to reprise roles, so that's them done. Except from Rita. She has 8 more episodes.
It's sad that this is one of her 10.
It's really bad, though, that I don't think... If it was listed, it wasn't clear previously that what Deep Throat X's time spans were. But Marita, yeah, I've got an actual count of how many times she's going to appear.
I hate the way the scene at the Burkina Faso embassy just really hammers home this sense of something is foreign and therefore it's creepy, when you've got the ambassador talking about his childhood encounter with a Teleco.
Yeah, well, possibly the same one.
But can you imagine actually doing this in the Western world, though? You know, we're viewing, oh, it's exotic, so it's creepy here, the presentation. It's like them approaching me and me saying, oh, yes, let me tell you about Black Shuck. Doesn't really have the same kind of effect to it.
Well, the thought that just came to me then is you do, not the diplomat thing, but you do the same kind of scene, and people have made this comparison before in the past, but you basically go and visit a Catholic priest, and you have the whole thing about, yes, and Jesus tore himself apart to feed his followers, and they drank of his blood. And, you know, if you put a certain slant on it, you can make it sound really, really strange. Which, let's be real here, if you actually stop and think about it for a second, it is really strange. Vampirism and cannibalism, day one of a new religion, what are you doing? Thanks to Eddie Izzard.
I was just thinking of Eddie Izzard when you said that. It's an absolutely great stand-up if you haven't seen it.
That one's in that Circle, I think.
Is that one Circle?
That Circle, that's got, yeah... I can't remember if actually, I think he mentions the X-Files in it as well, instantly. That's the one with the Death Star canteen, monkeys with guns, and the introduction of a new religion and the problems inherent, and the fact that Jesus' mother is Galadriel, which no one in that audience got, but I thought was a great joke.
Oh, you can see we're avoiding talking about this episode.
We are. But I would also say I think we are going to be struggling to say much more about this one. There's not much to it, other than it's like Tombs, but less good.
I think the best thing about it is probably the climax. That's actually pretty good and tense. When Mulder's incapacitated by a boa and you've just got Scully in the air ducts inside this kind of dilapidated building site.
And the fact that Mulder's able to signal her with just eye movements and expressions exactly what he needs to convey to her, which is a good growth of relationship for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go again with hazmat gear of we've got here based on asbestos fibres, so maybe we should be wearing some breathing gear. But other than that...
Yes. Oh, okay, then let's go for the problem with that bit is they go to... Boa has escaped the hospital in what would be otherwise... In Tombs would have been a really creepy sequence, and in this is just a kind of incidental one. It's not actually framed as frightening or threatening. He just managed to sneak into a cart somehow. And Mulder and Scully drive away from the scene and drive past a construction yard, and Mulder says, they found asbestos fibres. Let's try in here. Mulder, what are you doing?
Mulder's read the script.
Exactly, but it's a case of, shouldn't you look at the construction site near to where he lived, not where he's in hospital?
Good point. Yep.
But skipping past that, I would say otherwise, yeah, it's a good tense scene. It's just flawed in so many ways.
Yeah, it's a really missable episode. But I was having a chat with people at the weekend on Twitter about this series in general, and the general consensus is, although season 4 is highly regarded, it's got the biggest peaks and troughs, and we're definitely in a trough with Tilico.
Oh my, yes. The other thing I do, and I remember this is from memory of the first time round and everything, and so it is kind of relevant here, is this episode always has a weird air to it for me. And I don't know quite what to pin this on, but it almost feels like it's written where Mulder and Scully are off the X-Files. Like, this is an episode, feels like it could have been an episode conceived for season 2 before the X-Files reopened. Because there's a vague sense there of them being kept away from their normal investigative roots. And so, I mean, Mulder doesn't reference anything in the existing caseload, does he?
No, that's true.
This is all...
Or Squeeze, for that matter.
Or Squeeze. And again, I think I said at the time, if you can do a Squeeze nod in Softlight, you just need that one thing of, this is an impossible crime scene, Scully checks the duct, and that's enough. The fact that Mulder doesn't make the connection when they find him inside the drainage pipe, and also that doesn't... I mean, I can see why they wouldn't then suspect that he could have got into that cart, but there's no panic after that discussion with the diplomat. Is that when he tells them the Tilico story where he calls up in a hurry, that's going on in parallel to him escaping and them finding he's already gone via methods they can't figure out.
I can tell you, and I don't know where it should have fallen, but this episode is actually supposed to be later in the series.
Oh, okay.
It's because this is the last episode that was shown on X-Files' original weekday time slot before it moved to a better Sunday time slot.
Oh, okay.
But they decided that Unruhe was the better example of an X-Files episode, so they wanted that to be their first episode on the new time slot. So they reshuffled, just put Unruhe in that place in the rotation.
Okay.
So I don't know where Tilico should have been to have been swapped around, whether it should have been just the two of them transplanted or later.
Yeah.
But it's not supposed to be there in that run.
That kind of works, but I don't think it makes a huge difference to the surrounding episodes. But that's a good enough segue for me.
Yeah, let's escape Tilico. No more to say about this one.
Yeah, unfortunately we get a deeply uncomfortable episode, but for different reasons.
Yeah, I don't like Unruhe. For reasons we're about to discuss.
Unruhe, though, directed by Rob Bowman, written by Vince Gilligan, and broadcast on the 27th of October 1996. The only guest star of note, because there's a whole load of them, and Wikipedia only lists one of them with a page, so, is Pruitt Taylor Vince, who plays Jerry Snalls, who was in Jacob's Ladder as Paul. He was in JFK. He was in The Cell. That Cell.
Yes, he was, yep.
He's in Identity.
Okay.
He's in Constantine. He's in Bird Box.
All right, yes, he is.
He's been in an episode of House, but then again, so is everyone else, and he's in Stranger Things.
Oh, cool.
So, would you like to give us a synopsis for Unruhe?
I will do my best. Our episode this time opens in Traverse City, Michigan, where we follow Mary LaFant and her boyfriend as Mary goes to get her passport photo taken at a local pharmacy. She reaches the counter and finds she's forgotten her wallet, but when she returns to her car in the pouring rain, she finds that her boyfriend has been murdered. A killer, wearing a yellow hooded rain slicker, stabs her in the back with a hypodermic needle which instantly renders her unconscious, and then he kidnaps her. Meanwhile, inside the pharmacy, the clerk behind the counter peels open the Polaroid photo and finds a picture of Mary screaming amidst a very distorted, blurry background. Mulder and Scully are assigned to the case while the woman is still missing, Mulder's primary interest being the photograph. Mulder tells Scully about Ted Sirius, a psychic photographer who was famous for making thoughtographs, which were photographs that showed exactly what he was thinking of at the time. They visit LaFante's apartment, where they find her Polaroid camera, and Mulder shows this thought photography in action by taking several pictures of his gloved hand, which all appear looking identical to the one from the pharmacy. Mulder therefore deduces it's because the kidnapper has been stalking his victims. He's left a kind of psychic presence at the scene which has embedded itself on the film of this camera. Shortly afterwards, LaFante is found by police walking on the roadside, but she's kind of non-responsive and seems oddly out of it. She's given an MRI scan, which shows that she has been lobotomized. However, the lobotomy has been done incorrectly, leaving her permanently brain damaged. Meanwhile, the kidnapper gets his hand on a second woman, who's named Alice Brandt. We see her waking up bound to a dentist chair as a kidnapper speaks to her in German in a soothing voice, but approaches her brandishing an ice pick. Mulder and Scully begin to investigate Alice Brandt's kidnapping as well in the hope that they can reach her before she is lobotomized. Mulder is fixated on the photographs being key to solving this murder, although he can't find any photographs at the new crime scene. Scully, on the other hand, becomes more interested in a construction company who are present at both crime scenes and begins to wonder if one of the people working there is involved. Two of them split up to follow their own chains of investigation. Mulder returns to DC to have the photographs analysed. He finds no evidence that they've been doctored in any way, inferring that they are absolutely genuine. When he enhances them, he finds the face of an old man, as well as a shadow of a kidnapper in the picture, who is just shown as being a vague silhouette with abnormally long legs. Scully, on investigating one of the construction sites, meets Jerry Schnauz, who is a sheetrock installer. When she meets him, he's wearing a pair of stilts to be able to do this, so as soon as Mulder calls and references the kidnapper having long legs, Scully puts two and two together and realises it's probably him. After a brief chase, she manages to apprehend him, and they interrogate him back at the police headquarters. We learn that Schnauz was once institutionalised for a good few years after beating his father with an axe handle in retaliation for abuse his sister suffered at his father's hands. We learn that while institutionalised, Schnauz was diagnosed with schizophrenia, though now he is supposedly rehabilitated and absolutely okay. However, when shown the pictures and questioned on the location of Brandt, Schnauz claims that she is now safe from the Howlers, which he says are malicious spirits that inhabit the frontal lobe of people and force them to lie or otherwise deny the existence of Howlers. Shortly afterward, Brandt's dead body is found in the woods. She has also been lobotomized, but unfortunately has not survived. Mulder comes to believe that Schnauz believes that he is rescuing his victims from the Howlers, and that the photos are showing not what Schnauz hopes to do, but actually his nightmares. Scully just wants everything to be over. They've got the killer. She just wants out of this. However, that's not going to be forthcoming. Schnauz escapes police custody by killing the officer, and then robs a pharmacy, taking the passport photo camera, film, and enough drugs to start making the drug cocktail Twilight Sleep, which is what he's been jabbing these women with. While investigating the robbery, Scully is attacked by Schnauz, rendered unconscious and kidnapped. Realising that he's working against the clock, Mulder heads to the office where Schnauz's father used to work as a dentist. He finds that the dental chair has been taken. Of course, we see that Scully awakes bound to this chair, with Schnauz talking to her in German, claiming he's going to kill the Howlers in her head. He only hesitates briefly when Scully responds. She also speaks German. Scully manages to prompt him to take a photo of himself. We don't see the results at first, but they've greatly disturbed Schnauz and press him to want to lobotomise Scully faster. Meanwhile, Mulder, having investigated a photo of Scully he found in the photo booth after Scully was kidnapped, begins to put two and two together, and it leads him to a construction site which is conveniently near the place where Schnauz's father was buried. He notices a large Winnebago in the parking lot and realises that that is where Schnauz is performing these lobotomies. Luckily for Scully, he breaks in just in time to shoot Snouts before he can attack Scully. Mulder then examines the photographs Snouts took of himself, which all show him lying dead on the floor. At the end of the episode, Scully writes up her notes, unable to still explain the photographs, but she does talk about a diary being found that was written in second person amongst Schnauzer's things. It's an open letter to his father, which includes a list of the women he intended to save: Mary LaFont, Alice Brandt, and Dana Scully.
Thank you.
I'm just going to begin by saying I don't hate Unruhe. I think Unruhe is actually a tremendously effective episode. It just creeps me the fuck out.
I would probably concur, but then add a whole bunch of it is a bit iffy. A lot of people didn't like Soft Light, but I think Soft Light held itself together a bit better than this one. This one feels a bit slippery. The other thing as well is during your summer I realised that Vince doesn't get Scully at this stage.
I mean, he doesn't get Scully.
Well, it's to start with, it's Scully insisting that there's a plausible explanation for the photographs. So you go through the first part of the photograph film is stored over a heater, is out of date, so that could affect how the photographs come out. Which, okay, you're going to say, okay, Scully, but if we take your picture with this, is that going to produce the same results? I don't think so. And then when they find the Polaroid camera in the house and Mulder takes pictures of his gloved hand, and they come out and she goes, oh, this could have been planted here. How? How do you do this?
I think you've got to say is that the obvious answer for an empiricist like Scully is that it can't be psychic photography.
Which is fair. I do get where she's coming from, but...
It's like an illusionist. There's got to be a trick even if you can't see it.
Exactly, but I think the problem is that when the X-Files is at its best, Scully's able to offer something that makes sense for how it would be. So there's the idea of ambiguity. In this episode, nothing she's suggesting has the slightest shred of plausibility, because you can't have set this up ahead of time. Just no way. And to continue on the photos, you pointed out the kind of baffling, for at least our perspective, of when they go back to the same pharmacist where the passport photos were taken at first, and he's stolen the camera and all the film. There's a photo booth there, which might be different in New States, but in England, you can use that photo booth to take passport photographs and not bother anyone.
I don't know how they worked in the USA at this time. Maybe you did have to have a professional photograph taken.
Maybe you did, but it feels absolutely insane. It also kind of feels like they wrote themselves into a corner with we need to get across that Scully's the next victim. But he stole all the camera film. Wait a minute. There could be a photo booth that we didn't see before, and that's fine. The other part, though, and I will admit this is a very pointless nitpick, but it just kind of gets to me, is the reveal that the photographs are actually prophetic rather than fantastical, or at least it kind of gets split two ways, where some of them seem to be prophetic and some of them seem to be fantastical. Given the first Scully's and the first victims seem to be fantasy or nightmare, don't they?
Or they could be prophetic.
But what I'm getting at is I would like that same kind of weird theming on the two photographs he did, his selfie at the end and the one of the cop being shot.
I'm going to disagree with you, because I like the ambiguity of the episode of, we can read this two ways. Jerry is a paranoid schizophrenic, and therefore everything is happening in his head and the photos are representative of that. Which, again, doesn't really explain when he photographs things that are going to happen, unless I guess he's got an inkling he's about to be shot or something like that, you could argue.
Yeah.
Or the howlers are real, which is kind of more terrifying, is that Jerry's right and Jerry is seeing these monsters inhabiting people's heads. So the photograph is representing what Jerry's seeing.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it just feels odd that you've got these really artsy, weird photos for two of the victims, and then the other two are very perfunct, minimalist things.
Mm.
I just wanted more weird art, really.
But the howlers only infect women, as far as we can tell in this, because Jerry never targets anyone, and the grim reality of howlers is that essentially it's his way of dismissing claims his sister made.
Yes.
In the dark heart of the episode, his sister was violently abused by his father. He never believed that this happened, and he just thought it was some evil spirit inhabiting his sister, making her say bad things, until the sister eventually killed herself.
Yeah.
So you've got this deep tragedy in Jerry's past that he can only explain with women can be possessed by these evil spirits that make them say the wrong things.
It's true. I can see the point. I mean, it was just it's really neat artwork they've got for this. I did find it a bit strange, a bit funny when the guy's saying, "Oh, whoever did this is an artist. It's all seamless," and I can't but think, yeah, you could have got Drew Struzan in to do this, and he could probably do that for you.
The core terror of Unruhe comes in the form of the lobotomies, though, in the fact that we are framing this around a man who believes he's helping women by subjecting them to one of the most infamously barbaric medical procedures that have ever existed. That the more you read about lobotomies, is I didn't realise before researching the back of this episode, you know them from things like One Throw Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that there's something scary. But the depth of how scary this is and how this is just a big darkness in America's past. The thing I think is scariest about this, and it's another example like things we had like Irresistible with just horrible crimes against women in the X-Files, but there is nothing scarier than the lobotomy, especially as, it's a great darkness in American medical history, basically, that the lobotomy even existed. It's absolutely brutal, absolutely terrifying that this would take place. In modern society as well, because this was all within the last 100 years. I researched it a bit for this, and I would say to anybody researching this to proceed with caution, because it happened within our kind of timelines. There are videos and photos of these things occurring. It's not for the squeamish. But basically, a lot of what I know about lobotomies comes from the likes of Session 9 and One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. But my research showed that there were 50,000 of these, roughly, done in America over about a 50-year period. 14% of them resulted in death. 1/3 of them left the person in a constant vegetative state. And even the ones that were successes usually left people with things like vision problems and seizures and stuff like that. It's terrifying. The thought that he was a neuropsychologist, I believe, as well, not even a doctor, the guy that invented the transorbital ice pick lobotomy, could just develop this quick medical procedure that supposedly could cure all mental illness by sticking a huge metal spike through your eye socket and jiggling it about a bit. And then you've got the thought even worse again in this episode where you have Jerry believing that he's curing women by essentially destroying their brains in this way, in this 10-minute procedure. It's horrifying, and it's scarier than if he was just killing them. That's what's always stuck with me. Unruhe is one of the episodes that I remember the most vividly. I could remember all of this one before we saw it, just because when I first saw it as a kid, that whole concept just scared the hell out of me.
So it's around now, I should say, you might get back to Bioshock eventually. You should probably not play the DLC for Infinite.
No, I haven't played the DLC for Infinite.
No, you don't want the first-person view of that.
Oh God.
Yes, that is a thing that happens in Bioshock Infinite. Well, okay, no, it's not done properly, it's just done up to the point. Yeah, so it's very uncomfortable. I would say Session 9 is an interesting one because it's one of the only times, other than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where it's usually done to men. Because the example that always swings to mind, and not to make it a bit more levity than it should be, but is Sucker Punch, which is just one of the most stupid depictions of I've ever seen.
Interestingly, in the US, 80% of them were done on women. It was predominantly the way to, cure hysterical women.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the idea of the ice pick lobotomy was basically that they could be done by anyone, which makes it even worse. Is the guy, Freeman, the guy who coined it in America, the inventor of the ice pick lobotomy over the previous surgical procedures, used to drive around America in a Winnebago that he called the lobotomobile. Because, you could do this in 10 minutes and people could just walk in and have a lobotomy. You can't imagine anything like that happening in this day and age. Though bear in mind, he did this up to the 1970s. It's good that with the advent and a better understanding of mental illness and a better ability to talk about it these days is we have medicines for people and, treatments that can help and not sticking an ice pick through someone's eye socket.
Indeed. One of the older aspects of the episode is that with the ambiguity of the Howlers as to how much this is Jerry's head and how much is real, Mulder's interest in the case is completely incidental.
Mulder's purely interested in this photography.
Yeah, and that's the only reason he's involved at all. Whereas the actual case is the kidnapping and lobotomizing of women. They actually know that bit's happening. It's just a kidnapping case at first, isn't it?
Mm.
And without the weird photograph, Mulder would have never become involved in it.
Yeah, that's true. You think that Mulder would be more interested in kind of ascertaining whether these evil spirits are real?
Yeah, I mean, we could get into it. It's another area of Mulder's belief system where we're not quite sure how he factors these things. He definitely has a level of stuff he just will not believe flat out. Like, religious stuff is just not acceptable. And possession and ghosts, it seems to vary depending on the depiction and who it is.
We also see a lot of Mulder's kind of complete lack of empathy again. It's
Yeah,
particularly after Alice Brandt's found dead, when Mulder's still wittering on about the photographs, and it's like, Mulder, a woman's just been lobotomized and killed.
Scully's not feeling it at the moment. Although I have thought the framing of that scene was, I don't know if it's weird or it's meant to be trying to make a point. Because you've got a gang of police people crowded around this dead body in the middle of the flower field.
I've got to admit, I didn't realise she was dead when I watched the episode. I thought she was just catatonic, but it makes it quite clear if you read the young adult novel that she is deceased.
But irrespective of that, though, they're just standing around staring at her. They're not doing anything. There's no one covering up the body. There's no one going to get help. They're just staring at her. It's
Very weird.
It is. I don't know. Is that an unconscious decision by Rob Bowman, or is that something that Vince Gilligan put in the script? Or is this, we didn't know what to do with our framing, so this kind of happened on set?
Yeah, good point.
You made the point as well, though, in terms of convenience for plotting, is that unlike most of the cars that Mulder and Scully hire, this one's a really high one that someone can hide underneath.
Just so Jerry can get Scully from underneath.
Yeah, and do you want to get into Twilight Sleep? And Vince, do your research, man.
Ah, yes, I also had never heard of Twilight Sleep, so as always, I'm a glutton for punishment and did my internet research. But Twilight Sleep is they do mention it briefly in the episode, it's kind of a cocktail made of morphine and scopolamine, which was famously used in childbirth. So the idea of Twilight Sleep is one of its side effects is it's an amnesiac, so you would not recall the pain and the trauma of childbirth. But Twilight Sleep kind of works in an interesting way, scopolamine itself does knock people out in high enough doses, but Twilight Sleep was designed so it would have people in a kind of a lucid state. So you would be groggy, you'd be out of it, you'd be sleepy, but because, when you're pregnant you can't be completely unconscious, you're still suggestible, you can still be woken up very easily, you'll still, follow instructions when you're given them, which is not how we see Twilight Sleep working in this episode in any way. It also was discontinued because it's very hard to make. Because you're using two very, very dangerous, very, very potent drugs with the morphine and the scopolamine, if you have not worked out the quantities you would need to use exactly, it can easily be fatal and you can overdose on it very easily. Which I imagine Jerry is not figuring out the exact weight to mass of these women to be able to figure out these kind of quantities he'd need in the episode.
It seems distinctly unlikely.
When this is something that a skilled anesthesiologist might find difficult.
Yeah. One of these ones, unfortunately, usually get chalked up to this is TV convention just to make it work. But given the effect of the drug is completely out of it, and the only reason it seems to use it at all, rather than anything else it could use for this, because the usual TV show ad is chloroform. Chloroform doesn't work how people depict it does either. Is the dentist connection, and that's almost also kind of just incidental to what's going on.
You do kind of see it. Apparently, that was purely to play into the fear. Because at the time, it was reported that it was a rising fear of a lot of Americans was fear of dentistry.
Okay.
So they thought by having the abusive father being a dentist and him physically tying people to a dentist chair, you can feed into this unconscious fear of that and make the episode scarier.
Did the public perspective of Little Shop of Horrors change in this time period? I want to know now.
That would have been before, wouldn't it? That was early 90s.
Yeah, but the film exists in the entertainment, so would people then view Little Shop of Horrors as more of a horror experience during that time frame, rather than a comedy?
The dentist is kind of scary.
He has been over the top terrifying kind of way, though, that you start laughing at.
It's a tangent, but I went to see an amateur dramatics performance of it once in my hometown. And they had some kind of matinee showing with a load of little kids in front. And when the dentist came on, they all just started screaming. And they had to bring the actor playing the dentist out in the interval just so he could sit down with them and they could see that he wasn't actually scary and just not completely traumatize all these kids on the front row.
At least he did that. Completely segue. Anyway, back to Ray and its weird dentist thing. One thing I would give Vince Gilligan some praise for here as well is, as much as Scully is throwing out excuses for things she can't explain and not really trying to come up with a scientific explanation, and Mulder is making some generous-ish leaps of logic, there's still an amount of detective work again. I think we should keep on bringing up when it happens is times when Mulder's read the script, times when they're following evidence leads, and times when they kind of mashed the two of them together in unsatisfying ways.
You definitely have both of them following procedural in this, because you had Mulder's kind of Ringu-like analysis of the photograph, where he was realising that they are clues that pointed to Jerry's location within it. And you had Scully doing the proper police canvassing of people who might have been present in the area, finding the correlation between the building contractor.
Exactly. And of course, that's great until the moment it breaks down, which is Mulder staring at the photograph of Scully and saying, these 5 objects, I thought they were fingers. Wait, they could be gravestones. And you're going to say, okay. And that happens to be where Scully is in the graveyard.
Six gravestones.
Six graves, yeah. But it's... You can imagine the parallel reality where Mulder got the police force over there and they scour the graveyard and no one's found, and Scully turns up 3 days later lobotomized.
I did think it was a bit more graceful. I should have mentioned the YA novel for this one is called Howlers. But that scene is just a bit more graceful because you're in Mulder's head. You still have the leap of logic where he's looking at the newspaper article and the photograph and thinking, wait, 6 fingers, 6 tombstones, I've got a plan. But when he gets there, he sees the Winnie in the parking lot and kind of thinks, wait a second, if I was sat in that Winnebago, I'd be able to see the construction site and the graves, and that's the only thing I can see present that could fit a dental chair in the back of it. So you had a bit more of a reason for why he made a streamline for that Winnebago.
Yeah. I think the logic flaw is the photo's meant to be his nightmare thing. And he's looming over the women in this silhouette thing, and his father's face is just embedded into the picture.
You have that trauma, though. You've got the father's face and you've got the graves, because he said that he'd always tried to make amends to his father for beating his father into a wheelchair. So you've got that embedded guilt. So if it's his nightmare, why would his guilt not feature in it?
Well, that's a fair point. Although, then kind of say you'd truly expect the Session 9 wheelchair, or to most people know as a Silent Hill 3 wheelchair, and an axe handle.
But no, you've got the Howlers, his enraged father, and his father's grave for your 3 image.
True, although I'd still expect one grave, not the line of them. But
yeah, that's possibly a good point with that.
And then Mulder's out of luck with the clues.
But it's just like Ringu, isn't it? It's follow the clues and you find the source.
It's true. Although, I'm going to be slightly more scared if Gary Schnell scrolls out the TV at the end.
That would be unsettling.
Yep. Do you have anything else for this episode? Deeply uncomfortable and weird as it is. Didn't you look this up? How many times has this Scully's been kidnapped now?
5.
5 kids will find Scully. It would have been nice if they hadn't had that.
Let me see if I can remember. It's Dwayne Barry.
Yep.
Irresistible.
Yep.
Our Town.
Yep.
This one.
Yep. You can make a case for Born Again.
Lazarus.
Lazarus
is the last one.
Lazarus is what I mean.
Yeah. So they are 5.
Yeah. So it's a bit bad we're having that happen to Scully again. Again, I just can't focus on Scully's attempt to explain what's happening is the weakest excuses you've heard from her to date, I think.
I've got to admit, I don't have as much bones to pick with this one for you. Is the thing I dislike the most is that it's a Scully kidnap episode, and added to that is Scully doesn't get herself out of this problem, despite the fact she's tied to that bloomin' dental chair in the loosest way possible. Scully cannot free herself and has to be rescued by... I almost cynically said she had to be rescued by a man, but had to be rescued by Mulder yet again.
Yeah.
It would have been a lot more satisfying if Scully had managed to get herself free and had been the one to take out Jerry herself.
I suppose the other weird thing, the new thing we've learned about Scully is she speaks German, which has not been alluded to previously.
I guess it's never been relevant before.
It's never been relevant before. And the explanation I could come up with for why she can speak German is it's not impossible. Her father was stationed on a German airbase.
I don't know if she says it in the episode, but technically speaking, in the book she says she studied it in college.
Okay.
So I'm afraid not. I studied in the UK German up to the end of my GCSEs, however, and I can say that the word unruhe never came up.
It's not going to, is it?
We never needed to say we had no unrest.
College though is when you get into more advanced stuff. So if she did do it in college,
But no, American colleges though, it could just have been an elective.
it could.
You know, like when you're in community, they do their Spanish 101. It's not necessarily that you'd be doing it any more complicated.
That's true. Well, Scully apparently she was in the complicated one.
I mean, from the way UK schools worked, that meant I took German for 5 years. On that basis, it's therefore would have been more intensive than just taking it for a semester elective.
Fair. For a reason, Scully knows us.
I can go on the basis with 5 years of UK German, you can understand the German in this episode. It's not complicated.
There was a point there though. Is Vince? There seems to be a theme with you, given that this is sort of what you did in Pusher, but in Pusher, Mulder knows a random Japanese word off the back of nothing. In this one, he doesn't. No, he knows a random Japanese word off the back of nothing. In this one, no one knows the random German word that comes up. So, yeah, not quite sure what you're doing there.
I did read a criticism, and this one really is a hair pick, though, of when they first hear the word unruhe, it's because the woman is muttering it inside the MRI machine.
Yeah.
But she doesn't say unruhe. She says something like unru. And so where has Mulder managed to snag, oh yeah, that's not unru, that's unruhe, from this basis?
Oh, you know where Mulder got that from. He read the script.
Yeah, Mulder read the script.
But yeah, I mean, I do like the episode. It's just... It's a flaw. It's good but flawed. I mean, I enjoyed it more than Telego.
I think the thing that struck me most, it's particularly in Scully's write-up at the end, is this episode is Scully's grotesque.
Yeah.
Is you basically come to the same conclusions as in Grotesque, that to catch a killer, you've got to get into their head. However, Scully takes it differently because she's a much more nurturing personality than Mulder. Mulder takes it as you have to live in the killer's shoes, and become a sculptor and learn all this. But Scully kind of empathizes with him instead. Yeah. Scully tries to talk to Jerry and tries to understand him and tries to negotiate with him that way. It doesn't work because she's in this situation where she's damned either way of she has to say that the Howlers don't exist, which means he'll lobotomize her, or the Howlers do exist, in which case he'll lobotomize her. So she's in that never-win situation. But it's the same kind of feel to the conclusion.
Yeah. Anything else for this episode?
No, I think that's everything. I dislike it less than you, I think. I think this is a very strong episode. It's one of the strongest ones we've had for a while.
Oh, I said it was good. It's just...
And it sticks with you.
It does. I mean, it's just not liking how Scully's handled in some of these bits.
Yeah, I still have an objection to... If I'd been kidnapped 5 times, I think I would have had a complete nervous breakdown.
Yeah. So
I would no longer be an FBI agent who could be trusted with a gun.
Exactly. Well, either Scully's made of sterner stuff, or we've conveniently forgotten we've already racked up 5 times and Mulder's been kidnapped.
Once.
Was it once?
Illuminae Flask.
Oh, yeah, that's been it, isn't it?
I don't think he's been taken any other time.
No. Yeah, no, I think that is it. Well, next week, though, we have The Field Where I Died, and an episode I know you don't appreciate.
Yeah, I think it's going to be time for me to be the cynic next week with Sanguinarium. Possibly.
I can't defend Sanguinarium.
Remembering back, Sanguinarium is one of my most hated episodes, so that's going to be fun.
It does have a Twin Peaks person in it, though, so that's fun.
It does indeed have a Twin Peaks person in it.
Hooray! We like them when they show up.
Should I bet now if he's been in Bukuro Banzai as well?
Pretty sure he hasn't.
Oh, good.
Usually it's not the big ones like that. It's usually someone a bit further down the cast list. It's not my fault they've all been in the same film.
I'm trying to think who it is now. Is it Ben Horn?
It's Ben Horn.
Yeah.
Because is Leland Palmer actually in the X-Files?
I don't think so. I was just thinking in my head it was Leland Palmer, but it's
I'm
not,
pretty
is
sure
it?
it's Ben Horn.
It's Ben Horn in this one.
Leland Palmer, somehow they never got him in, which feels really odd given some of the other things he's done.
No, I don't remember Ray Wise being in an episode.
No. Might be we might have forgotten it. But in the meantime, if you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media, on Twitter, or X as I guess we're now calling it.
Yeah.
And Tumblr, we are GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42@universedon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where we're doing a Let's Play of the first X-Files game on the PlayStation.
Should be noticed there are 3 different tiers that you can fund us on Patreon. If you fund us at any level, you will have access to the Let's Play and any future special little extras that we do.
Which should include the novels, the comics, the second video game, and any other X-Files ephemera we can't fit in anywhere else.
Ooh.
Is the word ephemera you like?
I do like the word ephemera, mate, yeah.
I'm not actually sure what other ephemera we could do. I mean, the first thing that came to mind was trading cards, but I don't know if we can get out of trading cards. You can't get out of something else.
I do at some point want to talk about the lost episode, the one that was the basis for Final Destination.
Yeah,
because I do have the script for that in my collection, so that would be interesting to look at.
You have reminded me I need to look up what the unmade season 4 episodes were.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because those are always a bit, what happened there? Thank you all for listening, and until next week, please remember,
sometimes you have to start at the end to find the beginning.